This gospel is a common one at funerals, and at a time that's very sad and difficult with a lot of mixed emotions. I find a lot of comfort in this gospel, ironically, because Jesus is making a deep promise to his disciples, but also to us. He's promising that he's going before us to prepare a place for us with him in heaven. And then he kind of doubles down on it. He says, would I not tell you this if I wasn't doing this for you? He emphasizes, no, I'm going before you to prepare a place for you where you will be with me forever. There's something just very consoling about that Jesus, even now, when he was about to prepare for his death, he was thinking about his disciples. I'm preparing a way for you. And for us, 2,000 plus years later, he's thinking about us. He's preparing a place for us in heaven. How consoling, how true, how hopeful those words are. But like the disciples, it can be one thing to hear these words and let them really penetrate our hearts. We think, okay, that's a nice story, Jesus. But is this really truly the case? Do you really mean what you say? And the answer is yes. He's true in what he says. And we can ask ourselves, what do these words of Jesus, this promise, I'm going to prepare a place for you, what do they really do for us? What do they do within us? I think they really give us courage. They give us encouragement. They give us this hope of promise that we're going to be with the Lord, that he's preparing a place for us. And it changes our lives and our perspectives right here on this earth. To have our goal, our destination be set on heaven, to that place that Jesus is preparing for us. Now, Jesus, he's always teaching us. He's always teaching us through his disciples. And even this is the Last Supper. Jesus is about to die, and he's essentially giving his last will and testament to his brothers, his best friends, the disciples. And he's telling them, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And he knew that they needed to hear these words because they were about to witness probably the most horrific, traumatic thing in their life. We heard, in the first reading about the growth of the early church and how we have the institution of the deacons because the church was growing so much that they needed more help. Thank you, Deacon Barry. But it wasn't always like this. In the days after the death and resurrection of Jesus, there was a lot of confusion. They didn't understand the words that Jesus had spoken to them. They weren't quite yet in their minds after having witnessed that horrific event. We can look at the cross as a symbol of glory, but for them at the time, that it was not a symbol of glory. It was a symbol of defeat, of humiliation. But what did Jesus do? His words still remained true. So I can only imagine that after having witnessed Jesus resurrected and having encountered him in the upper room, that maybe this memory came back. These words that Jesus had told them, I'm going before you to prepare a place for you, that those words came back. They remembered, oh yes, yeah, Jesus told us that he had to die and rise from the dead, but also he's going to prepare a room for me in heaven. I can only imagine what comfort that brought to these that brought to the disciples in that moment. A sense of hope, a sense of peace, a sense of encouragement, and it changed their lives. They went and began preaching the word of God to their fellow Jews. The word spread, the faith spread, and now we are the fruits of that today. But all because they believed. It can be very easy for us. I know I can be like the disciples. I can hear these words and still have some doubt. We can wonder, okay, maybe I don't feel this way. Maybe I don't feel Jesus' words. It could be, I don't feel like Jesus is close to me. It could be, okay, Father, I went to confession. I received absolution, but I don't feel forgiven. It could be, okay, I know that Jesus is telling me that he's preparing a place for me, but I don't feel it. And that's fair. That can be a case in our lives. And the truth can hurt, but it can also be really consoling. I think today's words, it's a case where the truth is consoling because Jesus, his promises, they're true. Whether we feel them or understand them or not, his words are true. Jesus is preparing a place for you and me with him in heaven at the end of our lives. And that, changes us. We have a destination of where we're going to. We have a place that we will go at the end of our lives. And this gives us courage to keep on going, to keep on fighting while we're in the midst of life here. Often I think about, the saints and their example, but especially the martyrs, just the way that they lived, the way that they gave all for God. How on earth could they, undergo the things that they did? That's a big question, but I think probably one of the ways is they knew these words of Jesus, that Jesus went before them to prepare a place for them in heaven, and that they gave them the courage to follow him even up till death. I think about the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe, who was a priest in Poland during World War II and was arrested, was sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, one of the darkest, most horrific places on earth. And there was one day, there was a prison break, essentially. There were 10 prisoners who escaped, and as punishment, the Nazi guards lined up all the men and picked 10 randomly to be sent to the starvation bunker to die a slow, painful death. And one of the men who was, unfortunately selected cried out, "My wife, my children." And St. Maximilian Kolbe just, calmly and resolutely stepped forward out of line and said, "Let me take this man's place." And the guards, they listened. They said, "All right, if you want, go for it." And so they were sent to this locked room, just left to die. And something amazing happened. The guards heard the sound of singing, the sound of music, and what was happening was St. Maximilian Kolbe was leading his fellow prisoners in songs and hymns of praise and the psalms to keep them going and encourage them. Hey, we're going home to the Father. The Father's prepared this place for us, and we're going to be there soon. Let's encourage each other. Let's keep going. I can only imagine what courage that gave them to undergo something as awful as that. There's a movie I was thinking of the other day, 1917. I was kind of chuckling to myself, the examples I'm using today. Auschwitz and World War I. Go watch something happy, Father Michael. Come on. but there's a beautiful scene in this movie. The plot basically are these two British soldiers who are sent on a very dangerous mission to get a message across to a camp through enemy lines. And at one point, one of the soldiers, one of the main characters, he's just been through a lot, to say the least, on this journey. And he comes across a group of fellow British soldiers. They're just sitting in a forest, quiet. And one of the soldiers is standing and singing like an old hymn, an old folk song, "A poor wayfaring stranger." And really the refrain is, "I'm going home to see my father. I'm going home to see my mother." It's a very beautiful, powerful song. And the scene it's pretty amazing. You just have these young men just sitting in a forest, war weary, and this soldier is singing this song. And the camera pans to one of the main characters, a soldier, and there's just a sense of like relief that comes across his face. The war isn't over yet, his mission isn't over yet, but there's just a sense of rest, relief, and encouragement. This reminder, okay, the Father is preparing a place for me. I do have a plan in life. There is something more beyond this suffering that I am undergoing. And the reality for most of us, brothers and sisters, is we're not going to be asked to shed our blood for Christ, but we're going to pass through. Maybe we're going through difficulties in our own lives right now, in our families, sickness, economic problems, or even more. Maybe our lives are just kind of ordinary. Maybe they're just kind of boring. Maybe we're wondering, Jesus, does it make a difference that I'm changing my kid's diaper day in and day out? Jesus, does it make a difference that I'm going to work and working on my spreadsheet? Jesus, does it make a difference that I'm studying for finals that I just don't want to do right now? That's probably the reality for most of us, kind of these little small ways where life is just maybe kind of ordinary. But your life, my life, has meaning, especially in those ordinary moments, because, again, we have these words of Jesus. The Father's preparing a place for us in heaven. And so especially when we're going through something, a difficult suffering, or even if life is just ordinary and kind of unspectacular, cling to these words of Jesus. Jesus, you are preparing a place for me with the Father in heaven. And that is enough for me. That gives me the courage, the strength that I need to keep going through this life to the room in heaven that you are preparing for me. And going back to this notion that we can hear these words of Jesus, and it's one thing if we don't feel them or if we can't understand them. I often think about with the Eucharist. It looks like just a simple piece of bread that Father's holding up at Mass. Jesus, is that you? Are you really there? And again, going to the comfort of the truth. Yeah, it is. That is Jesus, who's about to be present on this altar in a few minutes, who is giving us his very life to encourage us, to give us the grace, the strength that we need to pass through this life, not with sorrow, but with joy, even in the midst of difficulty, knowing that we have a place that we're going towards, that room in heaven that he's been preparing for us for all time, that one day we will receive by his grace. So it encourages us to keep going forward. And I invite you, if you're in a place where Jesus, I'm having a hard time believing these words, I'm having a hard time that you're really there, ask him. You're not going to offend him. You're not going to scare him. Just ask him, increase my faith. Give me the courage I need just to keep going with you. And even if I don't feel your presence, help me to trust that you're there and show yourself to me. Keep me going on the way. Brothers and sisters, St. Augustine, he's got this wonderful sermon I'll close with where he talks about St. Augustine. He's very real. He's called the doctor of the heart because he went through every single human emotion and he gets it. In this one sermon, he's talking about how he believes in Jesus, he believes in his promises, but then he says, but why do I have anxiety in this world? Why do I worry about things? Why am I still struggling in this world? How many of you have felt that? I know I have. And he asks, okay, what is my response to this? And he says, sing. Like, sing? What do you mean, Augustine? He says, sing to the Lord because, singing, it makes work lighter. It makes our burden seem a little less heavy. It helps us to keep our eyes fixed on him. Easier said than done, but still encouragement and truth to keep us going through this life, keeping our eyes fixed on Christ, knowing that we have a destination to which we are traveling. So let us ask the Lord to let these comforting words of him preparing a place for us really penetrate our hearts today, to receive him fully in the Eucharist at this Mass, to guide us on our journey to the joys of heaven.